can't afford. Our panel tonight, the Minister for the Environment and Water, Tanya Plibersek, the Leader of the Australian Greens, Adam Bandt, the retiring Liberal member for Bradfield, Paul Fletcher, the head of the Menzies Institute, Georgina, and the political and international editor for the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age, Peter Hartcher. Welcome to Q&A. I'm Patricia Carvelis. I want to acknowledge that we're broadcasting from Gadigal land here in Sydney tonight. Remember, you can live stream us around the country on iView. All the socials, Quanda is the hashtag. And you can follow our live blog tonight on the ABC website. Follow the QR code on the screen and you can ask a question of the panel direct from your own couch. I mean, how convenient is that? Now, before we get to audience questions, I want to start with a bit of a temperature check, if I can, with the panel. And it's a pretty simple question, really, with only 5 sleeps to go. Who's going to win and why?
Well, the Labor Party has got about the same level of support it had at the last election and maybe even a tad more. So it's looking like pretty much a status quo outcome with either Albanese in majority or in minority, but it's Albanese.
The coalition's going to win because people know that they are worse off now than they were 3 years ago, with real incomes down about 8%, and practical measures like low and middle income tax benefit of up to $1,200.
Okay, so in majority?
Yes, I think we will win a majority. Yes,
you think you'll get a majority?
I think we can absolutely get a majority, and we're fighting every day over the remaining 5 days to get that outcome.
Tanya Plibersek.
Well, I'm hopeful that we'll win, and it's because we're doing things immediately to help with the cost of living, like lower taxes, higher wages, cheaper childcare, cheaper medicines, being able to visit the GP with just your Medicare card, free TAFE, lower uni debts, investment in housing, and we're also looking at the long term as well. Setting up our democracy for the future by investing in the ABC, by fixing some of our electoral funding problems. We're looking to the future as well. Georgina.
Well, I run a history institute, so I look at history and the lessons we have to learn from that, and I don't think we're going to see history broken on this occasion. I don't think this is another James Scullin just winning one term, because he faced the Great Depression and a hugely effective campaign by Joe Lyons to really combat what he saw as complete dysfunction in the Scullin government. I think the government will be re-elected, and look, the polls show it'll probably be re-elected, as Peter was saying, status quo.
Adam?
I think we're heading for a minority parliament, probably the most diverse parliament that we've seen, and I think that's really exciting. It gives us a chance to actually tackle the cost of living crisis, the housing crisis, and the climate crisis. I think people are realising that we can't keep voting for the same 2 parties and expecting a different result. But I think we've got within a couple of weeks, we're going to be able to keep Peter Dutton out and get Labor to act on some of the big issues.
OK, to get us started tonight, here's a question from Peter Strokorb. Hi, Peter.
Hello. The Voice referendum divided the nation. Now, the Welcome to Country ceremony is becoming a new point of contention. What ideas does the panel have to resolve the issue amicably and in the interest of all parties concerned?
Paul.
We do need to obviously recognise the distinctive place of Indigenous Australians and a culture that is 60,000 years old. But as Peter Dutton has observed, there is, I think, a sentiment across many in the community that we are having too many Welcome to Country ceremonies. And so I think that can tend to reduce their significance.
Tanya?
Well, I'm really proud of the fact that we've got 65,000 years of history and culture to celebrate in this country. And, you know, I was appalled when I saw that behaviour on Anzac Day with the Welcome to Country being booed. When I was at the dawn service here in Martin Place, the person who did acknowledgement of country in Martin Place was Harry Alley, who is a decades-long veteran, Indigenous veteran of our Air Force. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians have served in our Defence Forces since the Boer War in every conflict. And I think acknowledging that on Anzac Day is perfectly appropriate. And just by the way, when I travel to other parts of Australia, I love hearing about the history and culture of that place. I enjoy it and I celebrate it.
Anzac Day. Peter Dutton said it shouldn't, he doesn't think it's appropriate on Anzac Day, do you?
Look, I think it's a matter for the organisers of events, but I think we need to respect the views of veterans, because Anzac Day is about acknowledging the sacrifices that have been made by generations, and particularly servicemen and women. So I think we need to give their views.
The RSL thinks it's appropriate.
I think we need to give their views very significant weight.
The RSL thinks it's appropriate. So what's your response to the RSL today saying that they want to do it?
I think we need to give weight to the views of veterans. I think that's very important.
It is up to any individual organisation, Patricia, what they do. But Paul's speaking as though we don't have Indigenous veterans. Indigenous Australians have served
Tanya,
in every conflict since the Boer War.
That is a real piece of strawman rhetoric, if I may say so. I never suggested that for a second. And I can tell you that the role of Indigenous people in defending Australia over many conflicts has been very significant. Nobody's contesting that for a second.
It's just gutter politics from an opposition leader whose campaign is in free fall and he's starting to punch down. Right, he's starting to punch down. Now, we saw him, Peter Dutton was the master of misinformation during the referendum, which is what was referred to there, spreading all sorts of lies about what was going to happen.
The simple statement that Peter made was that many Australians think that we're seeing the Welcome to Country ceremony too frequently.
But on
about
Anzac
3
Day,
days...
That is a simple statement
about
that he
3
made.
days
I'm not sure
after
if
a neo-Nazi disrupted after a neo-Nazi disrupted
two totally separate issues.
He's playing from the Trump playbook as his campaign is in free fall. He is punching down, playing from the Trump playbook, and we're going to call it out.
Those are completely separate issues.
Peter?
Well, the question was about, I think it was how we resolve the issue amicably. We might have been veering out of the amicable territory.
That was a key word, amicably.
Yes.
Key word.
But look, the reality is that both the leaders, Albanese and Dutton, have agreed on the central principle, which is that it should be up to the host, the organising institution or host, to decide whether to have a welcome to country or not. So on that, there is no difference. And by emphasising different parts or different organisations and Peter Dutton deciding to make it a culture war issue, which he did today, by saying it shouldn't be at Anzac, it shouldn't be in Qantas flights. He's decided to turn it into a campaign issue. But on the central defining question that you asked, how do we resolve it? It's already resolved, and all the rest, dare I say it, as the only non-political representative here, is political posturing.
Well,
Georgina, I'm interested in the history here too. I mean, the last week, the number one issue for Australians is cost of living, but now all of a sudden there's this discussion.
Yeah. Well...
Is it that much of a motivating factor for voters?
I do think there is still an overlay from the Voice campaign. There is a sense that, you know, we're really struggling to find unity as a nation, that people, you know, almost every single Australian will have the highest regard for the contribution of Indigenous Australians, the longevity of their history, and want to see the gap closed. But I do think the acknowledgement of countries, the welcome to countries, there is a lack of understanding of the context and a lack of understanding of the history and of the importance or lack of importance these might have to Indigenous Australians. So I think really addressing the question tonight, it's actually about understanding what, you know, when is it appropriate and what is it doing? And, you know, as non-Indigenous Australians, how do we understand this and what this contribution and explanation has for our own social cohesion and own bringing together Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians? I do think that overuse of the acknowledgement of country tends to reduce its impact.
How about Anzac Day, though? Is that overuse?
I think in those moments of sort of national commemoration or celebration, an acknowledgement of country, a welcome to country has an important place. But I do, I was on a Qantas flight today travelling here to Sydney, and I sort of query about that moment. You go to a meeting and you have an acknowledgement of country. Is that kind of just window dressing? And these are important acknowledgements, important moments to be welcomed to country. I deeply respect that. But I think in order for them to continue to be respected and continue to make an impact on our community, we need to choose the right time and the right place when we can have the maximum impact, and not just make it a tick and flick, right? That it's just something, you just do and, don't even consider it.
One of the things that's One of the things that's underway in a number of states is a truth-telling process, and it was part of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And one of the advantages of that is there's no vote at the end of it, right? It's a process where people get to come forward, tell their truth about what colonisation has meant for them. And the experience in the States has been that it's actually a process of lifting understanding and a process of bringing together and allowing healing. And it was one of the elements of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And I think, to go to your question about what's the roadmap from here forwards, I think one of the lessons from the referendum is that there's a lot of misinformation, and people will use and spread misinformation for political purposes. And I think a truth-telling process without a vote at the end of it helps build a shared understanding, including some of those questions that you were raising about what this means for people and why we need to do it. So I think we should get back to implementing that Statement from the Heart in full.
Next, we'll hear from Candice Filipponi. Hi.
Hi, PK, and good evening to the panel. Housing has become a rigged game. Investors win, renters lose, and politicians pretend they're fixing it. When will any of you admit the system's broken because you benefit from keeping it that way?
Tanya?
Well, I actually agree with you that the system is broken. We don't have enough housing in Australia to house all of the people that we want to house in an effective way. And it's been like that for a long time. I was the housing minister in the Rudd government, and we inherited a housing deficit then. I built 21,600 social housing dwellings. We spent an extra $500 million on homelessness. We set a target to reduce homelessness. We started the National Rental Affordability Scheme, 100,000 properties there. That was ended by the incoming Abbott government in 2014 with only 35,000 of the properties built. And I have to say, I saw the huge changes that investment made at that time. Like the first house that was built in New South Wales, I went to visit that family. The parents of that family had been carrying their severely disabled son up and down 3 flights of stairs, lifting him in and out of the bath to wash him. They had a brand new home with a proper bathroom that they could wheel their son into. It was a fantastic property for them. It changed their lives. I saw the way that investment changed their lives. Then we went into a decade of Liberal government, no investment in housing, got rid of the homelessness target, ended NRAS, killed TAFE, which meant that we've actually lost a generation of building tradespeople. And here we are again. We're 3 years in to a new government. We've got $43 billion invested. We are spending 20 times more on transitional and emergency housing than the previous government for women and kids escaping domestic violence. 5,100 places there. We're investing in homelessness services. We're investing in social housing, 55,000 new social housing dwellings. We're changing the rules to make renting more secure. We're doing that with the states and territories. We're helping people into first home ownership, 5% deposits, 100,000 homes just for first home buyers, shared equity. We're doing all of that, and also free TAFE, of course. We're training the people who'll build the homes. It will take time for this problem to be fixed as a nation, but we have to keep doing it because this is a huge intergenerational inequity. We want people to be able to afford a roof over their head, to buy or rent. We want young Australians to have a home of their own. That's why we're investing $43 billion in housing.
Paul, do you accept that this is a long time in terms of a build-up, this housing crisis? Didn't just happen in 3 years, it was a long period of time.
Well, I think there's some problems that have really exacerbated it, including the very high levels of immigration at the moment, 1.2 million people over 5 years. And so that is about over 2 years, I should say, that's about 70% more than we've had over a 2-year period previously. Look, we strongly believe in the importance of housing and giving everybody the opportunity to get into the housing market. That's why we've committed to make it easier for people to draw on their superannuation, up to $50,000 for a deposit. That's on the demand side. Also, the measures we've announced for tax deductibility of your payments on your mortgage, up to $650,000. That's worth about $1,000 in terms of a saving per month. But we also need to address the supply side. All the experts say you've got to address demand side and supply side. That's why on the supply side we've committed a $5 billion fund to provide the enabling infrastructure, because often a council will have land that's available to be released, but there's no money available for things like curbing and guttering or sewerage or connecting roads. So our $5 billion fund, we believe, will allow some 500,000 homes to be released. And of course, the other important measure to improve supply is to dial down the number of people coming in through immigration for a period of time. We think that's worth about 100,000 additional homes available to Australians over a 5-year period.
So Candice, you've heard some of the solutions from at least the two major parties. We'll bring others in. I know you feel really a lot of anger about the intergenerational unfairness. Do you feel like there's some solutions that might help?
Yeah, they sound great, but why work together, get it done. As you said, Tanya, it's, there's a long trajectory there of failure in housing policy and people are really struggling. So, yeah, great ideas, but put it together, work together, get it done.
Patricia, can I just correct something that Paul said as well? Immigration numbers have actually fallen by 31% in the year. And you talk about international students as a problem in the past, Paul, the Liberals have. You actually voted against reducing numbers of international students in the Parliament. You voted against that reduction in numbers. So it's a bit hard to listen to you talking about housing as though this is just a problem that's emerged in the last 3 years. This has been a problem. Anybody under the age of 30 in the audience today, did you think 5 years ago that you were going to be able to buy your first home, this has been a problem that's been around for years.
When you let the numbers rip...
Yeah, Peter Dutton allowed 9 million... two years in a row, 9 million visas issued by Peter Dutton, the largest number of visas. There's a big difference between that.
The largest number of visas 2 years running. On the numbers coming in, students and people coming in on permanent migration. Look, we are big supporters of immigration in the Liberal Party, but we've got a real mismatch at the moment. New housing starts are at a 10-year low. And a really important point here is we need the private sector to deliver the housing numbers. Yes, there's a role for social housing, but unless the private sector is working, we will not get Australians into the homes they need.
400,000 homes have been built since we came to government.
I'll bring Adam in. I mean, is immigration part of the story? Because the Coalition says they can free up a lot of houses just by cutting immigration.
Firstly, no. Like, if immigration was driving it, then why didn't house prices fall during COVID when we didn't have people coming into the country? Like, this problem has been going on a lot longer. Back in the 1980s, the average house cost 3 times the average income. Now it's 8 times the average income and rising. Why is that? Well, because in the 1990s, Liberal Prime Minister John Howard decided it would be a great idea to give massive tax handouts to wealthy property investors that is pushing up the price of homes out of reach of first home buyers. And now, as we sit here today, Labor and Liberal are giving $180 billion in tax handouts to wealthy property investors. What that means is a first home buyer turns up to an auction with all their savings and they bid as much as they can. A wealthy property investor who might have 5 homes is next to them. They can just keep bidding the price up and up and up, knowing they've got a big fat cheque from Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton in their pocket to write it off as a tax loss. And it is tilting the playing field against first home buyers, and it means that renters and first home buyers don't stand a chance. We need to wind that back in a way that is fair to the mum and dad investors who might have got one additional property that they're using for their retirement. Like, they're not the ones who are out there trying to screw the system. But if you've already got 5 houses, the federal government should not be giving you a subsidy to go and buy your 6 while people are struggling to get there first. Like, if you've got 5, 6 or 7 houses and you want to go and buy your 20th, 50th, 100th, don't expect a handout from the federal government. We should be using that money to instead fund things like a cap on rent increases so that there's a bit of breathing space for renters, get government to actually build more homes that people can rent and afford like it used to. And that way we're going to start getting back to the situation where current generations, where Gen Zs and millennials have the same chance of owning a home as previous generations. And that's all we're asking, like basic fairness. And I have parents and grandparents who come to me who may have even benefited from this system themselves, who say, we know it needs to change because I'm worried about my kids and my grandkids being able to buy a home. And with 7 million renters and with Gen Zs and millennials the biggest voting bloc at this election, you have a chance to make your voice heard.
I know, everyone is all about Gen Zs and millennials now. Have you noticed? You guys are our new best friends. I'm like, everyone's like wanting to hang out with a Gen Z person. OK, we'll keep this discussion going with a question from Oliver Zhang. Hi, Oliver.
Thanks, Patricia. Australian national structure has long relied on security from the United States and economic prosperity from China. As competition between those two powers escalates and the pressures mounts from both sides, has this dual dependence now become a systematic risk to our sovereignty and strategic autonomy?
Peter Hartcher.
Jang, I think the two elements both limit our political autonomy because we thought we were being really smart by relying on the US for security and China for prosperity. But all we've done is over-rely on both, become complacent about it, and now we face a situation where in Trump's America, we cannot assume that the US is a reliable ally, and yet we are so deeply invested in US systems that we can't simply walk away from the alliance, even if we wanted to. You can't fly an F-35 fighter jet unless you're getting the software upgrades that are coming out of the US. None of our systems can operate they need parts from the US. We're deeply immersed. But on the other hand, we're also over-reliant on China for our exports. Despite and talk about complacent, 5 years ago we saw $20 billion of export bans put on Australian exports. We have done a tiny bit of diversification, but still a third of all our exports go to China. So we are way too dependent on China. That limits the ability that we have to act against China, just as our security over-dependence on the US limits our ability and freedom to move without the US. I think we're approaching the culminating point of our complacency, where our options are severely limited by both those dependencies as a result of a long-running complacency. And this is the moment with China's ambition to dominate and America's madness, thanks to Donald Trump. If we don't act now to change those dependencies, we're fated to permanent paralysis.
Georgina, are we kind of wedged and complacent?
I think there has been an element of complacency when it comes to the threat from the CCP and from China. We have, as Peter said, we have engaged in some diversification when we were at the subject of China's aggressive economic sanctions on Australia, banning our coal, our barley, our lobsters, our wine, and we did explore other markets. The reality is, though, we do not... in terms of our security, our economic and investment relationship, that is much more strongly with the United States than with China. Our relationship with China is a trading and export relationship. So in the end, we need to be realistic that the economic coercion and the militarisation of China, the aggression and intimidation we've experienced over the last few months with Chinese spy ships circumnavigating Australia. We've had live fire exercises off our coast. These are dangerous times, and we need to be realistic that a continued dependence on exports to China will just open us up to even more possibilities of economic coercion. We have proved to the world that you can stand up to Chinese economic coercion, and we need to work extremely hard to build our alliances with countries like Japan, India, with the United Kingdom, with the United States as well, who recognise that that pushing back against this sort of aggression, economic aggression, military aggression, look what we've just seen the PLA do to Philippines the other day. This is a highly dangerous time, and we need to be using all our diplomatic statecraft to build those alliances, to ensure that they are strong, and to have a trading and economic relationship that is flexible. We were able to prove that in the 1960s when Britain decided to enter into the European Economic Community. We pivoted. We pivoted to Japan. We pivoted to Asia. We shifted our export focus and investments to the United States. We've done this before. We can do it again.
We've been asking some learned Australians for their big ideas during this election campaign. Sam Roggeveen heads the Lowy Institute's International Security Program. Here he is on re-examining our relationship with the United States under President Donald Trump.
America's becoming a less reliable ally, but that's mainly because of China, not Trump. China's now so big that it forces America to ask whether being top dog in Asia is really worth it. And unfortunately for Australia, it isn't. America will be a secure and wealthy country no matter who's in charge in Asia. So Australia needs to do more for itself. We need a powerful military built around an echidna strategy that makes us look benign and friendly to countries that mean us no harm, but spiky and indigestible to those that do. The good news is that China's far away and has very little reason to attack us. But we're giving them reasons by building AUKUS submarines and hosting American bombers. We'd be more secure without them.
Tanya.
Sam's book's actually a really good read, The Echidna Strategy. It's actually, if people are interested in foreign policy, worth having a look at. I think the central point that we have to be more self-reliant as a country, both in defence and economically. I think that's a point well made by Sam, and it's certainly what we're pursuing as a government. I mean, we've stabilised the relationship with China. We've got $20 billion of our exports back into Chinese markets. That is fantastic. But at the same time, we've been working across the Pacific to re-establish relationships with Pacific neighbours that were trashed under the previous government when they joked about climate change, meaning oceans would be lapping at the doors of our Pacific neighbours. We've built up our trading relationship with India. We're exporting billions more to India. We've just signed a trade agreement with the UAE. And when it comes to the United States will always be a really important partner for Australia. But
are they a less reliable partner now?
I think they'll always be a very important strategic partner for us. We'll continue to have a very close defence relationship with the United States. But I mean, you know, if COVID taught us anything, the more that we can do for ourselves, the more self-reliant we can be, the better for Australia.
Adam.
Look, we need to detach from Donald Trump. Labor and Liberal have now spent decades aligning Australia's defence and foreign policy with the United States. And the AUKUS submarines, for example, are not about protecting Australia. They're about being part of whatever Donald Trump's next military adventure and a military attack is. That's not the Echidna strategy about protecting our country. That's about joining in another country's attack force. And what it does is it paints a huge Donald Trump-shaped target on Australia's back. One of the big concerns for Australia, threats to Australia, the region, the world, is escalating tensions between the US and China. We should be doing everything we can here as a player in the region that has relationships with both of them to de-escalate tensions. And instead, under Labor and Liberal, we're signed up to be basically doing whatever Donald Trump says happens next. And that is not going to make us less safe. And they're spending over $375 billion on these nuclear power submarines that may never arrive. Like, it's a huge amount of money. You could spend $1 million a day for 1,000 years and not reach that sum of money. I can see Georgina angling,
but I think she's in fierce disagreement with you, Adam.
So we do need to come up with a strategy that works out what is in Australia's best interest, not what is in Donald Trump's best interest.
So tell us what the Greens' defence strategy is then. tell us how the Greens are going to deliver a potent military force, because we've got a plan which we committed to, we secured to use to get access to nuclear-powered technology for submarines. This will give us a potent capability. It is important that we have the capacity to defend ourselves. It's also important, by the way, that we're paying for it, which is why we've committed to $21 billion of extra funding for defence and to get defence spending to 2.5% of GDP and within 10 years to 3%.
Your defence spokesman the other day, Andrew Hastie, I was speaking to him on afternoon briefing, and he said that, you know, we do have to change strategy because Trump is less reliable. Do you agree that Trump is a less reliable partner for us?
What is clear is that we have a long-standing relationship with the United States. We have shared values. We have mostly a shared language. We've got a whole range of reasons why it makes sense to maintain what is a critical security relationship, including the capacity to have really potent weapons. But we also have to pay for it. Now, under the current government, $80 billion of defence spending has been deferred or cut. They got rid of the 4th Squadron of the F-35A fighters. We've committed to restore that. We do need to be serious about our self-defence. These are challenging times. We need a potent Australian military, and we are very committed to that.
We're actually going to spend almost $11 billion more over the forward estimates and almost 60 over 10 years.
No.
By the way,
80 billion
Paul, when you were in government, you made $42 billion worth of announcements that weren't funded. They had no funding attached to them. If we had to protect the country with press releases, we would be fine.
If we're attacked while Labor is in government, the answer will be to say to the attackers, just wait till we get to the end of the forward estimates, because that's when the money comes, and then we'll have the weaponry.
Yeah, you could have started building submarines a decade ago, and you didn't.
Bring some sense to all of this.
OK. Where do you want me to
Peter
start?
Hartcher.
Where do you want me to start? Well, look, a couple of points from Sam and then a couple of points from Tanya and Paul's exchange, if I may. So Sam's contention is that we paint, well, and to use your words, Adam, painting a target on ourselves, a Donald Trump-shaped target. And Sam likewise said we're giving China reasons to attack us. But China has already decided that it is on a historic mission to dominate the region and the world and break Australia's sovereign will. 8 years ago, Sam Dastyari, we learned that there was a concerted Chinese campaign to corrupt and influence Australia's political system. 5 years ago, we learned that there was a systematic program of trade bans accompanied by 14 demands issued from the Chinese embassy in Canberra to break Australia's sovereign will. What was it? 4 weeks ago, we saw a Chinese task force circumnavigate Australia, something that even the Soviet Union didn't do at the height of its powers. China has decided that it is going to be the dominant power. We are already a target. Nothing we can do will change that. All we can do is decide whether we're going to have the power to resist or not. And I think most Australians would think that we should be able to resist and make our own sovereign decisions. The echidna is a brilliant metaphor, but the echidna, when under attack, curls up in a ball and goes into a burrow in the ground. Now, that's an attractive idea when you're under attack. But the problem is that Australia earns its living in the world not by hiding away, but by exporting and importing across the ocean, which is why we need an alliance system so that countries can keep the sea lines of communication open. Georgina talked before about cooperating with all the other countries in the region. There's not just China, not just America. There's a whole bunch to cooperate with the Japanese, with the South Koreans, with other like-minded countries to keep the sea lines of communication open for all as a common good. I would say about the exchange between Paul and Tanya that I think both parties are fundamentally inadequate in the way they have operated Australian defence policy and their plans for Australian defence policy. The Australian Defence Force today is the same size. The man who wrote Australia's 1987 Defence White Paper told me a couple of days ago, made the point to me that Australia's Defence Force today is exactly the same size it was when he wrote the 1987 Defence White Paper. This has been a serial failure by both political parties in Australia. Both of them have belatedly realised that we have been too complacent and they're both getting active. And you just heard a debate between the two of them about how to get active and when and how to allocate the money. I think the Liberal Party's ambition to have a higher amount of spending allows Australia to build the AUKUS submarines, but also replace existing capability as it expires. But the Liberal Party didn't tell us how they're going to spend the extra money. There's no capability attached to it. It's just, it's a political target it's a slogan. So I think that's inadequate, and I think Labor's current spending is inadequate as it is. I think we need to hear from both parties on the other side of this election realistic plans for making Australia, giving Australia the capacity.
I think it's unlikely we're going to hear it this week, that's for sure.
Sadly, that's true.
I think we can call that. Briefly before we get...
Briefly, I know we've laboured this point, but it's critically important. Sam's book is, I agree with Tanya, it's a really good read. It's a cute concept, the Echidna strategy, but it basically argues that Australia is too far away for China to care about. Well, that's patently untrue, given what we've seen over the last few years. The other thing I would like to remind Sam and others who are sceptical of AUKUS and you know, this sort of peace through strength ambition that we have, is that it was in the 1930s when we were woefully unprepared for the impending war here in the Pacific and World War II. And it was in the early 1940s when we came under attack from Japan. We had the bombing of Darwin, we had Japanese midget subs in Sydney Harbour, we had Japanese planes in Hobart. Australia is not too far away from a foreign power to be invaded, to be intact. We need to be realistic. Do we want to defend our country or do we want to bend the knee? Well, I say defend our country. Well,
we asked Australians what they think of the US alliance. YouGov polled the nation and found 2/3 of voters, 66%, say the US can no longer be trusted as a military ally, and Australia should develop a more independent military capability. That's a massive shift from when we asked the same question 9 months ago, when only 4 in 10 Australians questioned the relationship. Now, concerns on Donald Trump run deep, with YouGov finding 70% of Australians worry he'll make Australia worse off. If you're just joining us, you're watching Q&A Live with Tanya Plibersek, Paul Fletcher, Adam Bandt, Georgina Downer and Peter Hartcher. A video question now from Tasmania. Here's Debbie Dunn.
Yesterday, at the Vote Salmon Out rally in Hobart, Tasmania, 6,000 of us joined together to say we do not want those toxic fish farms polluting our waterways any longer. Enough is enough. So, Labor and Liberal, how many of us have to stand up before you will not only hear us, but take action to remove these farms from our waterways?
Tanya.
Well, thanks to Debbie, and I appreciate the question. I think it's important to understand that the Tasmanian salmon industry is an important employer in Tasmania, and it should be able to operate in an environmentally sustainable way. The Tasmanian Environment Protection Agency should be doing a better job of regulating. I think the recent large salmon death numbers, the fat globules washing up on the beach and so on, is incredibly distressing for Tasmanians in particular. They love their natural environment down there. It's a beautiful part of the country. We should be able to have a sustainable industry that supports those blue-collar jobs and also protects this most extraordinarily beautiful part of Australia.
Adam?
Well, it's incredibly disappointing that in the last week of Parliament that we had, instead of working together to legislate to cut student debt or get dental into Medicare, instead Labor and Liberal joined together to weaken our environment laws because the big salmon corporations asked for it. And now, at the end of this Parliament, we know 2 things. One is, according to the Australian Conservation Foundation, Australia's environment laws are now weaker at the end of the Parliament than they were at the start. And second, that the government has approved, with the opposition's support, over 30 new coal and gas projects. We are facing a climate and environment crisis, and we're facing an extinction crisis in Tasmania as well. We only get to do this once, and the decisions that we make now will echo for generations. And I think part of the reason that you're seeing so many people understanding we can't keep voting for the same 2 parties and expecting a different result, and why you're going to see such a big vote for someone other than the 2 major parties this election, is that people want our environment laws to protect our environment, not protect the corporations, right? And people want to see us use Parliament to actually make people's lives better and protect our environment.
Patricia, can I respond to that? Adam, you could have voted for stronger environment laws in the Senate any time from July onwards. We would have established Australia's first Environment Protection Agency. Maximum penalties going from $15 million to $780 million. A world-first definition of nature positive. You could have voted for stop work powers for projects that were going off the rails. You could have voted for any of that from any time from July onwards. Instead, you teamed up with the Liberals to block environmental law reform in the same way you teamed up with the Liberals to block the carbon pollution reduction scheme last time Labor was in government. That resulted in 10 years of delay on our transition to becoming a renewable energy superpower. You talk about coal and gas. You know what I've done? I've approved more than 80 renewable energy projects, enough to power every single home in Australia. We've added 15 gigawatts of renewable energy to the grid. That's 3 times Snowy Hydro. It's more than the nuclear plants will ever deliver if they are ever built. We've done that already in just 3 years. We've already done that. We're on track to get to 43% emissions reduction. We're on track to get to 82% renewable energy. We are engaged in the biggest transformation of the Australian economy in anybody's living memory, and instead you get this negativity from
Wait a minute, I will ask you, Paul, but I want you to address the question in the video because it was addressed at
the Tasmanian salmon industry. What we've just seen is the fight between Labor and the Greens for inner city votes in inner city Melbourne and Sydney at the expense of the thousands of people who work in the Tasmanian salmon industry. We are committed to the Tasmanian salmon industry. It's an industry that we should all be proud of. And unfortunately, the livelihood of thousands of workers in that industry is being held hostage to a fight between Labor and the Greens over inner city votes.
But didn't you vote on the same laws?
Yeah, you voted for it.
You and Labor voted on the same laws.
Have been clear.
I was there.
We have been clear where we stand on this. The Tasmanian salmon industry is important.
Yeah, no, but you did vote. I just want to clarify.
There was an 18-month period under which this process went on, and there was no certainty given to that industry.
Can I just clarify something though? Like, last time you were in government, we actually worked together to pass laws that saw $13 billion for clean energy coming. We've got dental into Medicare for kids, right? And I think there's a choice that Labor has to make. And this is why I'm actually quite excited about this next Parliament, because like, if Labor chooses to work with the Greens and the Independents instead of with the Liberals, we could actually pass laws to protect our environment, to take climate action, to get dental into Medicare.
You voted for
this
that.
This is why I think we're within a few short weeks, we could actually elect the most progressive parliament in Australia's history and get some really good stuff done. But for so long as the big corporations call the shots, and you know, you talked about that other legislation, Tanya. I mean, I think the WA Labor Premier boasted on the national stage that he picked up the phone and killed the environment laws. Like, I think everyone knows what happened.
So you were going to back them, were you?
So I think...
Did your party room agree?
My point is that there's actually space for cooperation, right? There's enormous space for cooperation.
So your party room agreed?
And I'm really hopeful that in a couple of weeks' time, that's what we can get back to.
I am interested in that question. Did your party room agree?
We were really close to reaching agreement. Look,
from July
Minister,
to December, no compromise.
I sat in those meetings, including with the Prime Minister, and I think when, as I say, when the WA Premier goes and boasts on national TV that on behalf of the mining corporations,
he's not the problem, Adam.
He killed the legislation, I think
well,
we
is
know
he a
what
bit
happens.
the problem, though?
No, look, the legislation went to the Senate in July. The Greens could have voted for it in July, August, September, October, November, December, and they chose not to. So looking around for someone to blame now is a bit frustrating, really.
OK, we've got a question now from our live blog. Josh writes on the live blog. We love the live blog. Thank you for contributing. What policies would the majors be willing to trade to govern in minority?
Oh, you're looking at me.
I am. I'm totally. I am definitely not going to form government, so I'm definitely looking
I was looking at the audience.
Yeah, well, they are lovely, aren't they?
Yeah, they are lovely. None. The Prime Minister's been very clear. We're determined to win a majority government, and he's made clear that there's no deals.
But if you don't, you would have to compromise, wouldn't you? I mean, that's inevitable.
Well, we've worked across the parliament. We've worked with the Liberals, the Nationals, the Greens, the minor parties, the Teals at different times to pass legislation that we will always deal with the parliament that the Australian people elect. And what we're hoping is that we get a majority in the House of Representatives and enough votes in the Senate that we don't, we don't have to be finding these very difficult compromises on the environment.
Given, Paul Fletcher, you said at the beginning that you think that the Liberals can win the election. If you fall short, but, you need a couple of seats, it means you also, the same question from the blog applies to you. What would you trade on?
Well, look, our message to the Australian people is that majority government is a good thing.
Yeah.
We have had majority government in Australia since World War II, with one exception.
Sure, but that would be 19 seats for you.
To 2013, which was a chaotic disaster. The 2010 to 2013 period of minority government was a chaotic disaster. And Australians, we would argue, need to remember that. And our system for a long time has relied upon one party being in a majority, and that has delivered better outcomes.
Peter
for our
Dutton
nation.
himself, I've heard him, has talked about governing potentially in a minority parliament. I mean, he has conceded this, hasn't he?
Well, what we're fighting to do is to win in majority. Of course, if we had the chance, if we don't get a majority, but we had the chance to form minority government, of course we would be open to that. It would depend upon all the circumstances, what the numbers were, and it would be a call for our leader at the time.
Adam?
Well, we've been really clear that in what I think is going to be minority parliament, we wouldn't support Peter Dutton. We'll keep Peter Dutton out. But the things that we'd put on the table for Labor, I mean, you can look at what we did last time. We got dental into Medicare for kids. We got $13 billion for clean renewable energy. We got action on climate change. I think getting now dental into Medicare for everyone, making childcare free, tackling the housing crisis, stopping native forest logging, one of the things that we were trying to negotiate with the current government, and stopping new coal and gas projects. These are all things that would actually make people's lives better in this country. And I think there's this growing frustration that we're seeing this battle of the Band-Aids this election. Instead of tackling the big issues that we're facing, like it's just $100 here or $100 there, maybe it comes in a year, maybe it only lasts for a year. Where's the serious, lasting reforms that will make people's lives better, that will make us a more equal country by making it so that you don't have to fork out when you want to go and see the dentist? All of these things are within reach, right? And I guess it's taking third voices to put them on the table.
OK, I just want to bring in our other panellists just very briefly before I get to the next question on minority.
Yeah.
I mean, we heard Paul Fletcher's, and Labor too wants a majority. These guys don't look like they want a minority government.
No, well, I think that's understandable.
But yes, it may be because people want to govern. But do they need to be realistic? Because a third of Australian voters are demonstrating another interest.
Yeah, well,
they have to respond to the voters' needs.
The Australian electorate, I mean, Adam's right, and we're probably not going to agree on a huge amount, but I'll agree on the fact that Australians are starting to fall out of love with the major parties. You know, the last election, I think it was something like 60 or so % voted for a major party. The rest of the electorate was voting for a minor party and independent. I think, though, that majority governments are good for this country. I think that they give the people accountability. Whoever is elected, if it's a Labor government, a Liberal government, if they get a majority, they are accountable to the electorate and they have to defend at the next election whether they delivered or not.
So you would prefer Labor to win a majority on Saturday?
I would prefer a majority government in this country.
So even if Labor were to win, you want them to win a majority?
I think it is horse trading. And we've seen, as Paul said, between 2010 and 2013, unstable government, lack of mandate. It's a whole lot of sort of pork barrel bits and piece politics. It's not good for this nation. If we want long-term decent policies, it's incumbent on the two majors to start thinking big, to start thinking bold. And I think one of the reasons why 30-40% of the Australian public are falling out of love with the majors is we haven't had that bold, clear vision for Australia. And I am yearning for that.
Can I just jump in?
I think it's Peter's turn and then I'll let you have a go.
But if you just look at two big reforms that have been delivered by Labor, capital gains tax and the other changes of the 80s, or the GST by the Coalition in the 90s, both depended upon a government that was in majority to deal with the political pushback you get on any significant reform.
That's an interesting point.
Well, we're talking federal level, but there have been plenty of experiences in Australia with minority governments. Every state in the Commonwealth has had a minority government in recent years, every one of them. Maybe that's why people are warming more to the idea of voting for independence and small parties, because they can see the sky doesn't fall. And the major parties, of course, to form government would do whatever deal they had to do. You might remember Tony Abbott rang up Tony Windsor when he was trying to form a minority government.
He rang me.
He rang you?
He rang me. Well, he said, "Hi, Adam. It's Tony Abbott here. I've always considered myself a bit of an environmentalist. I think we should talk." But the conversation didn't last very long because we made it clear
Adam,
where we were going to go.
Have you told this story before?
I have,
Where?
yeah, in smaller circles.
Where? Wait, have you told this story on television before?
This might be the first time.
Scoop! Wait. Tony Abbott called you genuinely to court your vote.
Correct.
Yours.
And it was a very short conversation because he was anathema to the things that we were standing for, and Peter Dutton would get the same response this time. But like this,
wow.
Of course, like I think that everyone says that they're not going to talk, but I would be astounded if they refuse to respect the parliament that the Australian people select. And like the flip side of that is that we've all got to give a bit. Right? OK, we might not get everything we want. And the changes, yes, we accept that some of the changes that we're pushing for are big changes. And they might not happen overnight, but nothing changes if nothing changes, right? And we just can't keep voting for the same two parties and expecting a different result.
Well,
and I think it's
Adam,
what people are saying.
maybe you could have driven a harder bargain, because you might remember famously Tony Windsor said when Abbott rang me up to form government, he said, "Mate, you can have anything you want except my arse, and maybe even that."
Wow, I'm just looking forward to the next week. Our next question comes from Phil Schulz. Hi, Phil.
Thank you, PK. As a Bradfield resident, I'm wondering why the Liberals are on the run. They have never lost in my election, but Bradfield is now one of the most marginal seats in Australia. How have the Teals managed to put the Liberals on their run in their own heartland? And does this die-hard Liberal constituency, now on a marginal knife edge, sound the death nail for the coalition?
I think that might be for me.
I reckon. It had all of the hints, didn't it?
Look, we've got a tough fight in Bradfield, there's no doubt about it. We've got an outstanding candidate in Giselle Kapterian, a very capable professional woman. There's an enormous amount of money being spent by the Teal machine. It really is the Americanisation of Australian politics, the kind of massive dollars that the Teals are pumping into individual seats. But we are continuing to fight every day, and I believe Giselle's going to win, and I believe she'll be a very good representative for the people of Bradfield.
But on the question, do you recognise that there's been a problem in terms of the Liberal offer for it to be on a knife's edge? I think that's at the heart of your question.
I think it's the nature of modern politics. You know, John Howard makes the point that 40 years ago, you had 40% rusted on coalition, 40% rusted on Labor, 20% contestable. Clearly, politics has changed. Every politician has to recognise that there is no such thing as a safe seat.
I want to bring you back in, Phil. You are supporting the...
I'm supporting the independent candidate, the Teals, Nicola Buller.
Why?
Why? It's a two-horse race, so in my constituency it is either one or the other. To be honest, the sort of left-wing moderate side of the Liberal Party has collapsed. To vote for a party that has such a crazy nuclear policy that everyone knows will cost 2-3 times what they think of it, and if it is ever delivered, that don't really accept and embrace that we do have global warming, that we do need environmentally friendly policies to do with, particularly relating to energy, and Australia has ample renewable energy.
So is nuclear particularly something that motivates you?
I think it's the lack of acceptance around the fact that we're in a new world, that we do not need coal anymore. That is something of the 20th century, and that a mainstream party in Australia is still sort of pushing that idea of coal and saying, well, global warming, is it really important or not?
OK, it's an interesting point you make about nuclear, because I've heard it from other Liberals too, that it is a bit of a deal breaker for some people. Are you getting that feedback?
Well, when I speak to constituents, what many people recognise is that this is a way to achieve net zero by 2050, because nuclear is emissions free, and that's why, of the 20 largest economies in the world, Australia is one of only a couple that is not either using nuclear or seriously examining it. Look, we see a world where today we've got baseload coal, we've got natural gas and renewables. We see a world where the baseload coal gets replaced with baseload nuclear. You continue to have natural gas, although that will reduce over time, and there will be a big component of renewables in the energy system that we plan to deliver. But what you see in the great majority of countries around the world that we would benchmark ourselves against is that nuclear is an important part of how you achieve net zero by 2050.
I think Phil's question was whether the Teals have got the Liberals on the run out of your traditional heartland seats like yours. I think, Phil, that the Liberals themselves have run out of seats like yours, because why were the 6 Teals elected at the last election in traditional mainstay Liberal seats? It was, 1, because they'd become the party of climate deniers, and 2, because their attitude to women was somewhere between, sort of neutral to dismissive. And what's happened since then? Has the Liberal Party convincingly become a party that's determined to act as quickly as possible on, as reasonably possible on climate change? And has it improved its offer to women? Its own review after the last election found that you should have 50% women pre-selected for the House for this election. In fact, it's only in the 30% range. So I don't know if the Teals have got the Liberals on the run or the Liberals have just run away.
Well, can
Briefly, because yeah. I'm just going to...
I'm very pleased that we have very capable professional women in their 30s and 40s, people like Jamie Rogers in Warringah and people like Giselle Kapterian in Bradfield. And it'll be for the voters to choose, as it always is.
It is. They've got till Saturday. They're all voting early, though. Put your hand up, actually, if you voted early. Look how many... What is it? What did you like Saturday? It's a sausage. It's incredible how many people are voting early, and it makes you all very busy. Look, before we finish up tonight, on the cusp of a really important event coming up this weekend, I want to just end on something. I know it's a little corny, but I think sometimes these conversations are very, very heavy. Something positive. It doesn't have to be about politics that you're reflecting on.
There's 7 million people in the country renting, and Gen Zs and millennials are the biggest voting bloc. Like there's this election.
Always those Zs.
I think it's, but I think there's. I think we could see something really significant happen and really positive.
Georgina.
We are incredibly lucky. This Saturday, we get to vote in a free and fair election, and the result will be what the result will be, and we will accept it and move on. We are so lucky to live in this liberal democracy.
There will be, yeah, you're right. No challenging. Everyone will accept the Australian Electoral Commission's counting, and that'll be it. Tanya.
I'm happy that in just 3 years we've added 100 million hectares of land and ocean to what we protect in Australia. That's an area larger than Italy, Norway and Germany combined.
Look, my positive observation would be, as I leave the Parliament, as I've gone around my electorate over the past few months, I've been really touched and moved by the number of people who have said to me, thank you for your service, including people who've said to me, I've never voted for you, but I appreciate your work. And, but the point is, I think that is people saying we still respect and value our democratic system and the work of our parliamentarians, and I personally have been very touched by that.
Well, I think I'm on a unity ticket with Georgina. According to the Economist Intelligence Unit, there are only about 21 full democracies left on planet Earth. Just think about that. There are 200 countries and only 21 full democracies. We are proudly one of them. And that's a tremendous blessing, and we really need to nurture it and to thank the people who put their lives on the line to represent us.
Yeah, that's true. I absolutely agree. And actually, can I say, and to our audiences throughout the election campaign who turn up, ask questions and want to be part of the process, thank you guys. That's it for the show for tonight. Thanks to our panel, Adam Bandt, Georgina Downer, Tanya Plibersek, Paul Fletcher and Peter Hartcher. And thank you for sharing your stories and your questions. Next week, we're back in Sydney live, but it'll be a post-election show. We'll probably have a result. The panel will include journalist Paul Kelly and social researcher Rebecca Huntley. Head to our website to register to be in the audience. Good night.
This election, a lot of people are going to try and sell you a pack of lies. But not me. You can trust me. Hey, don't trust him. He's just advertising. So are you. So are you. This